One day I wanted to meet you in my full form.
Satisfaction moved Enkrid's lips. If he got any closer, the leader might notice, or perhaps not. Enkrid wanted to reveal his presence. It wasn't due to competitiveness or a desire for a fair fight. What kind of competition is there with a monster? It was simply a test. He wanted to confirm what he had built up through today's repeated efforts. The leader, who had 2 mutated creatures with him like guards, snapped his head back at Enkrid's voice. He didn't just turn his head. He raised 2 daggers and pointed them forward. All of this happened in the blink of an eye.
As expected, you're fast.
Enkrid was impressed. The leader shouted. In response, the 2 mutants who stood like guards reacted. This shout sounded similar to a ghoul's. One of the mutants leaped forward. At the same time, it swung a club from above. Enkrid raised his sword smeared with black blood, diagonally. The heavy club fell with a whoosh from above. Enkrid's gaze was blurred. Just before the club could strike his head, the sword moved. No, his whole body moved. He twisted the blade and struck the middle of the club, then pushed forward. The surface of the club was peeled away as if scraped by a chisel. Enkrid's sword surged forward and slashed the mutant's neck. The attack cut through the mutant's neck, slicing through muscle, bone and tendons. As its neck was severed, the mutant let out a sound like air escaping. As the creature crumpled to its knees, its yellow eyes began to dim, and it fell forward. Regardless of the first mutant's fate, the second one charged at Enkrid. Enkrid feinted with his sword, and then dodged to the left, evading the club and performing a horizontal slash. With a twist of his wrist, he swung his sword in a semicircle, cutting through the middle of the mutant's head. The combination of brute strength and technique produced this result. The mutant's head was sliced in half, like a pumpkin with its lid removed. But instead of seeds and flesh, its head was filled with brain matter and black blood. The severed top of the mutant's head fell to the ground.
If you run, you'll die with this in the back of your head,
Enkrid said, flicking his hand. A whistling knife flew out, embedding itself deep in the head of a normal mutant who hesitated to charge. The knife was buried so deep that it was almost invisible, but blood spurted out. The mutant fell backward, bleeding profusely from its head. Koosh! Sensing their leader's danger, the remaining mutants reacted, and Enkrid hoped the leader would confront him. He had never come this far before. So today was a new experience. He didn't know what would happen. The leader might retreat. What then? He'd just chase him down and decorate his head with a throwing knife. On the other hand, if he attacked,
can I survive today?
He asked himself. The answer was still uncertain. He was hopeful, prepared, and had assessed his opponent. But the outcome of a fight is always uncertain. Moreover, the leader wouldn't show himself unless Enkrid was significantly injured, like having a hole in his thigh or a severe wound near his navel. The leader only appeared when his opponent's mobility was restricted or they were gravely injured.
What a cunning bastard.
It was a compliment of sorts, only stepping in when the victory was certain. How clever. And the mutant leader didn't retreat. He moved as Enkrid had hoped. There was a sudden sound, almost like a burst. That's how fast he was. Even though Enkrid had prepared, the speed was incredible. As the leader kicked off the ground, his body stretched out like a shadow in the sun. The stretched shadow was visible to Enkrid. His eyes never lost track of the opponent. Seeing was always possible. The problem was defending against something so fast. The glinting daggers in the Gnoll leader's hands couldn't be allowed to even graze him. They were poisoned. One touch, and it would be over. Then it would be a repeat of today. Sk, st. The first slash grazed Enkrid's shoulder. It only grazed. It didn't even touch the skin. Enkrid's armor wasn't something that a mere dagger could easily pierce. Only a cut on the outer leather showed any evidence of the attack. He completely dodged the second slash. The Gnoll leader slashed with his right hand and stabbed with his left, but Enkrid twisted his body, causing the stab to hit empty air. It was an impressive reaction speed. The moment he saw it, his body moved. It was an attack similar to the Valendual's sword technique, but despite the different rhythm, it was extraordinarily fast.
It works.
As expected, he could avoid it. While he couldn't avoid being grazed, he could prevent being cut or stabbed.
The sense of evasion.
It felt more like training to increase reaction speed than just a sense. That's how it felt. It seemed the name didn't do it justice. These fleeting thoughts quickly vanished. In any case, if he focused entirely on dodging, maybe he could avoid even being grazed. But was there a need for that? Probably not. It was time to move forward. The day had come to survive today and see tomorrow's sunrise. The leader of the mutants was furious. His reddening eyes reflected that. It seemed like red light flickered in his yellow pupils. He rushed past Enkrid, then turned to charge again. This time, he lowered his stance and aimed for Enkrid's thighs. It was a difficult trajectory to dodge. One dagger even seemed to target the inside of the hip joint, with the two daggers crossing in rhythm. A wrong move, and he could be castrated. Enkrid didn't wait to react after seeing and recognizing the attack. He moved immediately upon seeing and perceiving it. That was a small but significant difference. It was almost the first time he used this in an actual sword fight. His reaction speed, changed with a foundation of coordination, was key. It was a new world, a step into a new world. At least, that's how Enkrid felt. The difference in reaction speed brought a difference in reflexes. The body, continuously trained in the isolation technique, expressed this difference in perception. The moment he saw it, he swung his sword down. Whoosh! Crack! Snap! As the mutant leader charged, the blade cut through the air vertically, like a flash. Of course, it didn't just cut through the air. From the gnoll leader's head down to the middle of his back, the blade split him. The leader's futile hand movements continued. He reached out with both hands, not even realizing he was dead. The left hand uselessly stabbed at the air, but the right hand targeted Enkrid's hip area as intended. Enkrid bent his knees and used his armor to absorb the thrust from the dead mutant. A dead man's hand loses its strength. The dagger fell helplessly from the leather armor. Even though the old leader's body had been split in two, he continued to move, then finally fell apart to the sides. His guts and blood spilled onto the ground. The slash was so fast that blood splattered in a straight line behind him. He intended to split the head, but the leader reflexively dodged. So instead, he cut diagonally from the shoulder, splitting him in half.
Hooah.
Exhaling, Enkrid felt a surge of exhilaration.
I am advancing.
It was the joy of growth, a moment proven by the result. Using the sense of evasion, he dodged the poisoned dagger and cut through the enemy with a single well-coordinated strike, thanks to his training in reaction speed. Before that, he had tracked the enemy's movements with his eyes, and the heart of the beast gave him the courage. Of course, this wasn't the end. The area was still filled with gnolls and monsters. Now the problem was finding a way out.
Ha.
With a shout, Enkrid swung his sword powerfully at the two gnolls blocking his path. The correct sword technique, he had no time for such precision. He had learned the best swordsmanship for slaying monsters. Northern swordsmanship. The North was said to be a harsh land where monsters and beasts roamed freely. Their swords had evolved into the best form for slaying monsters. Enkrid had learned that style. Whoosh, slash, crack, with a perfect centrifugal force. The two gnolls were split into upper and lower halves. There would be no reunion for them. Having split the two gnolls, Enkrid started to run.
Can I make it out?
Avoiding them all day? That was possible. But escaping after exhausting himself in battle? That was difficult. Through this experience, he learned that conserving energy was crucial in long fights. But now, he had crawled to kill the gnoll leader and engaged in a brief but intense battle. And now he had to carve a path back to the original village? That was a different issue than just dodging and holding his ground.
Can't we just meet again tomorrow?
Enkrid muttered while dodging, knowing it was a pointless question. Naturally, the gnolls didn't respond. The answer came from a hyena monster attacking from behind, jaws wide open, aiming for his back. Enkrid reacted instantly, striking the monster's head with his elbow. The monster, hit squarely, fell to the ground. In one fluid motion, Enkrid drove his sword into the monster's head. In that moment, two more monsters and a gnoll lunged at him, but he swung his sword horizontally with his left hand. The gnoll, wearing something like leather armor, stumbled back a few steps after being hit. He couldn't cut them down in one go. He was short of breath and couldn't put enough strength into his swing. His stance was off, but it was also due to using the heart of great strength in the fight.
This is tough.
If he overexerted himself, his hands would tremble. Of course, a short rest would suffice. It was time to dance once more with the sense of evasion. The gnolls' cries seemed to shout, "Kill him! Kill that human!" Enkrid calmly retrieved his sword and moved his feet, dodging what needed to be dodged, parrying what needed to be parried. He seemed like a master of offense and defense. If anyone saw this, they might think so, but such movements were imperceptible from afar. Enkrid felt a sense of satisfaction from killing the leader. Along with the exhilaration, it felt like he was overturning the plan laid out by the ferryman. How could this be possible? What was the original obstacle? In Enkrid's mind, the obstacle was fighting a monster with the head of a hyena wielding a poisoned dagger while risking injury. No, it was winning the fight without even getting scratched by the poisoned dagger. Enkrid had twisted that path. Was it impossible to catch the leader without getting injured? No, it was possible. That path was also available. But he didn't want to go that way, even if that was the predetermined obstacle.
He has such an annoying laugh.
He didn't like the gnolls' laughter, even though he praised the leader for being cunning enough not to show up without confirming a critical injury he didn't. Like it so, what should he do? He thought a bit. He didn't need Krace's help. It was too simple a task. Block the entrance, hold the barricade, and fight the leader. It was all intentional, that was the result. The leader was dead, and none of the pioneer villagers were killed by the gnolls or hyena monsters. If anyone had died from a thrown stone, that couldn't be helped. At least from his perspective, no one had died that way. This wasn't about protecting the people of the pioneer village. It just happened to turn out this way. If he had to give a reason, it was simply that he really didn't like the gnolls' laughter. More than anything, this was more efficient than fighting with injuries. Of course, to finish this beautifully, he needed to wrap things up properly here. In other words, he had to survive. He conserved his breath and strength. After failing to clear a path with a few northern swordsmanship techniques, he reverted to simpler attacks, but the way was still blocked. It was a moment of decision. Should he hold out and wait for another opportunity, or should he use all his remaining strength and unleash the heart of great strength to break through? Neither seemed like a high probability option. Enkrid felt this instinctively, but there didn't seem to be another way. In the midst of his brief contemplation, what was this? It came from the direction of the village entrance. The heavy wooden gate of the village swung open, creating a path. Thanks to the commotion caused by Esther and Enkrid, the gnoll horde had turned their attention away, leaving the area in front of the gate clear. Unable to contain himself after watching everything unfold, Deutsche Pullman stepped outside.
Highway. Anyone keep bail out. Leave your gear and get lost.
It was a proposal fitting of a mercenary captain. Why would someone who fears for their life become a mercenary? Deutsche's subordinates rushed out in droves. Deutsche Pullman, having come out of the village, swung his glaive forcefully. Behind him followed 10 vigilantes who had been with him since his mercenary days. Among them was the gatekeeper's squad leader, who had been guarding the gate this morning. The squad leader watched and was amazed.
That's a perfectly insane bastard.
He saw everything Enkrid did, covered in the blood of beasts and monsters.
Is he crazy?
Running away covered in blood. What about that panther? Using the panther as bait to escape. No, that couldn't be. The problem was the direction. After crawling, Enkrid went deeper into the enemy lines. It was a route that no sane person would choose. The squad leader also witnessed Enkrid killing a gnoll that was behind them. After seeing everything, how could anyone call him normal? Only then did the words of Kreis, the big eyes, resonate with him.
Dishu. The Kinskan River to Kurdskreimwarn.
A truly insane bastard, and because he was doing such crazy things, his heart raced. Just watching was unbearable. The squad leader was smart and quick-witted. Seeing the situation unfold, he realized there was a spy or something similar within the mercenary group.
What if he hadn't acted?
If he hadn't done such a crazy thing, if they had left the spy alone, what would have happened then? This village? That pack of gnolls? Even with just the hundreds of hyena beasts? Could they handle that? Absolutely not. Only the worst outcome awaited, where no one would survive. Because that man did something crazy, the outcome changed. The gnoll standing behind, its movements were unusual. Even from this distance, there was an afterimage left by its movements. It was clearly the leader of the colony. That madman killed it.
How long could we have held out?
If the leader Noel had survived and controlled the colony, what would have happened if it had led them? He don't know. The only thing certain is that he would have been a dead man. Deutsche Pullman thought the same. They both watched, so how different could it be? They agreed on two things and acted: that Enkrid was insane, and that he absolutely should not be allowed to die. How could they let the hero who saved themselves and their comrades die, even if he was insane? Both Deutsche and the squad leader felt the same and acted accordingly. Ultimately, their choice was right. Esther's remarkable efforts, Enkrid's fierce fighting, and the resistance of Deutsche and his men. All of these elements came together, and as Enkrid's group narrowly entered, a rock fell from above.
Die.
Someone, cleverly, had found a rock and dropped it from the wall. With a thud, a round rock the size of a person's head fell on the back of a hyena beast. The rock, crushing bone and muscle, rolled to the side with a thump. The ribs protruded between the entrails, sprawled on the ground, groan. A knoll nearby, hit in the head with a rock, clutched its head and collapsed. The nearby quarry and the collected rocks made it possible.
Shoot.
Afterward, the arrows that rained down on the enemies became beautiful ornaments for them. The leaderless enemies began to scatter, fleeing in all directions.
We survived.
Returning, Enkrid spoke calmly, as if he had just been out for a stroll, casually organizing his gear. He laid down his blood-stained sword and began to take off his armor. There were a few bruises and injuries visible on his body. He had pushed himself because dodging everything wouldn't have allowed him to break through. These were intentional injuries for Enkrid, but how would it seem to those watching?
Damn it.
Deutsche muttered. He looked at Enkrid, dumbfounded. How could he be so calm? Why is he so composed? It was as if his guts were so swollen they could be left anywhere. Deutsche said, sitting down. His tone indicated that he had come to accept the other party, acknowledging that he had barely survived as well.
Yeah, sure.
Enkrid nodded. He wasn't acting recklessly anymore. He was calm and composed. How could he be so collected at a moment like this?
A completely unreadable guy.
Deutsche thought to himself but held his tongue. After all, this was the man who had saved him and everyone else. Enkrid was more than an expert at coming up with excuses. This wasn't the first time something like this had happened. It was something he had done countless times before.
I was doing my morning workout. I recognized the faces of the two guys on the watchtower.
An excuse doesn't need to be perfect. It just needs to make sense. The matter was already resolved, so who would question it now?
That's when it hit me. Those guys were cultists. I had seen them in passing during my mercenary days, but it took me too long to remember.
There was no sincerity in his words. It sounded like he was just saying whatever came to mind. It seemed like a lie. Even upon reflection, it felt like, just take it as it is. Deutsche felt uneasy, but as Enkrid had predicted, he couldn't pursue it further. In the end, Enkrid's words were true, and the matter was already settled. He had captured cultists, after all, and the man before him was indeed the hero who had saved him.
They are no longer in sight.
The words came from atop the wall. It was Kreis. When did he get up there? No, upon reflection it made sense. Who else could have prepared and thrown the stones if not him? It wasn't the chaotic vigilantes. It was Kreis's doing. He had persuaded the workers and craftsmen to throw the stones. As soon as Kreis finished speaking, those gathered on the wall and watchtower began to speak.
The enemies are retreating. Phew, we survived. Oh, huh.
Workers, vigilantes, and other residents all worked together to stop the monster horde and defend the wall. They survived just before death, as if someone had pulled them back from the brink of falling off a cliff. How could they not be grateful? They turned their gaze to the person who had pulled their sleeve. A man with black hair and blue eyes stood there.
Why, it's true.
He was asserting in a very dry tone that what he was saying was true. But no one paid attention to what he said, not even Deutsche.
Let's do that.
That was all he said. What's important is knowing why they survived, which isn't hard if you're not a fool.
Who did you say that guy was?
It was one of the craftsmen who had come out to build the wall. He asked Kreis. They had become friendly over the past few days. Kreis, sitting down on the top of the barricade, what could be called a gallery if it were a wall, spoke as he felt weak in the legs.
Enkrid, he's a madman.
That guy is completely crazy. How did he run out there to fight?
Right?
Esther, who had somehow appeared, nodded in agreement. Kreis looked at Esther. It was the first time they shared the same opinion. Esther was equally astonished. She had agreed to watch his back, and then he went and nearly got himself killed. Had things gone slightly wrong, her important item for breaking her curse could have been damaged.
Kya.
Esther, who was clearly displeased, made a noise.
Yes, he's mad.
The craftsman who had been listening nearby mumbled to himself, repeating Enkrid's name.
Enkrid, no, it doesn't roll off the tongue. Madman's Wall, yes, that's better.
Huh?
Kreis turned his head, and the craftsman, as if making a decision, spoke with conviction.
The name of the wall that will be built later.
Is it okay to name the wall like that?
Should I stop him? No, I let it go.
After all, even Kreis was too exhausted to intervene, his legs completely drained of strength.
Madman Enkrid Wall, maybe that's better.
Meanwhile, the craftsman was contemplating a second option on his own. The sun was setting. The day was about to end. As soon as Luagern heard Enkrid's words, she moved and immediately went to the house of the man identified as a cultist. Finding him was easy. It was rare to find someone who would resist Frog's questions. The cultist was lying with a woman. When ignored and called out, he came to the door half-dressed, and Luagern confirmed his face. It was the man who had been following Deutsche Pullman around like a freshwater fish.
Is it him?
Upon seeing him, Luagern immediately asked. The man tilted his head, then awkwardly replied.
Yes. What do you need?
The man showed a friendly smile, but Frog's discerning eye found it anything but pleasant. He looked like a fish head, after all. The man's expression seemed to say, "Do I need to explain what's going on?"
Is it him?
Or not? Luagern questioned internally and performed a simple test. This would serve as an answer to the expression. She stepped forward and threw a punch. It wasn't a lethal strike, just a test. Considering the possibility that he might be a cultist, there was some force behind it, but it was still just a test. Of course, to the man, it was nothing of the sort. Frog, a natural-born warrior, had intended to land a blow. The punch, delivered with a twist of the right ankle, would have shattered his head if it connected. The man instinctively sensed the danger and reacted. A brief hum. Simultaneously, Luagern's hand was blocked by a translucent barrier. It was milky and murky. It wasn't a spell. Luagern had hunted down and destroyed more cultists than even an inquisitor. She recognized it. It was a unique protective power of the cultists. So, it was the correct answer. Enkrid's memory had been spot on.
It's him.
Frog's cheeks puffed up with a mix of joy, excitement, and anticipation.
How did you know?
As soon as the cultist realized his identity was exposed, he moved. He stomped the ground twice with his left foot. Despite being called a heretical cult, the followers of the cult of the demon realm did not easily decrease. Why is that? Because it so easily transformed lives by granting power, the power he had acquired since becoming a priest shone. With 2 stomps, the man's figure disappeared. Luagern's whip lashed the ground where he had vanished. The dirt was gouged out to the depth of a finger joint.
This bastard, huh?
As soon as he thought things had gone awry, instead of relying on the barrier, the guy fled immediately? It wasn't a teleportation spell. Such a high-level spell wouldn't be so easily cast. What he used was a power that accelerated his body in a short time. This was also familiar. At one time, catching such individuals was Luagern's job.
Just a frog.
A voice was heard. About 10 steps away, maybe a little more.
I'm a priest. Do you want to die? Then come. I'll use you as fertilizer for the expansion of our faith.
Go ahead, make it easier for me by trying to kill me. Frog Luagern responded to the arrogant taunt not with words but with action. She kicked off the ground. It was a charge. The priest of the cult of the demon realm quickly stomped his right foot twice again. This time, it was the power of levitation. Thanks to acceleration and levitation, he narrowly avoided the whip that sliced through the air where he had been.
If I catch you, I'll start by ripping out your tongue.
Luagern said cheerfully, puffing out her cheeks as she spoke. The priest, deciding it was time to flee, took off. Luagern chased after the cultist, and they ended up playing a game of cat and mouse almost all day. In the end, Luagern lost him. She chased the man for a full day, but the cultist had a trump card summoning magic. He was a troublesome opponent. Because of the creatures he summoned, Luagarn had to give up the chase to deal with them.
We'll meet again.
The cultist had shouted as he fled, and Luagarn hoped there was some truth in his words, now that she knew his opponent's tactics.
Next time, I'll break his legs first.
Only her resolve had changed. Luagarn returned late at night. As she circled back around the quarry, she finally saw signs of battle in front of the pioneer village. What is this? The traces alone indicated that something fierce had happened. The signs of battle, the blood-soaked ground and walls, the scent of excited humans and the stench of blood filled the air. The atmosphere was quite peculiar. It was gloomy yet not entirely so. In the midst of it all, the man who had been the reason Luagarn had not returned earlier was visible. The man named Enkrid. What was the original wall?
Overcoming the leader, Noel, while risking injury.
Leader Noel was astonishingly fast and wielded a poisoned dagger.
A fight where even a scratch is unacceptable.
A battle where a single nick could determine the outcome. It felt as if the wall had been set up just for him, requiring a reaction speed that matched his, and a coordination that allowed his body to move the instant his eyes perceived something. It was a fight that seemed impossible to win without achieving such abilities. Enkrid thought of his opponent as a wall, and added a slight inflection to this thought. It could be considered a kind of trick.
What if I faced him without injury?
While it would drain his stamina, there was a possible method. Additionally, most of the settlers wouldn't have to die. Enkrid did just that now. It was time to see the results of his actions. In short, Enkrid needed to determine if he had truly overcome the wall or just done something pointless. The verification was simple. It was just a matter of time. And the conclusion:
It doesn't go back.
blink, 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 blink. No matter how many times he blinked, it stayed the same. The night was deep, and the time to return had long passed. Thus, he had overcome the wall.
What are you doing?
It was the voice of Kreis, who had been watching. He lay sprawled nearby, the voice Enkrid had been hearing for some time.
What a word of life, huh? Is my luck bad this year?
He had been muttering something like that, and then asked Enkrid.
I feel like my luck is good this year. That doesn't seem entirely wrong. If your luck was bad, you probably wouldn't have made it back alive. But why are your eyes like that? You look like someone possessed by a ghost. It's scary, so stop it.
Oh, really?
Even so, Enkrid blinked his eyes a few more times. As he blinked, he wondered if it was possible to get through a day with such a trick. Or if this was the original path. Or maybe he just needed to overcome the challenge he referred to as a wall. He didn't know. There were too many things he couldn't understand. Repeating today was just the latest in a series of incomprehensible events.
Will it come up in my dreams tonight?
Maybe he should ask the ferryman. He didn't expect a pleasant answer, but asking might be better than not asking at all. It was all pointless, really. Spending mental energy on this was meaningless. He might as well swing his sword a few more times. Suddenly Esther, who was nestled in his arms, pressed against his chest. Perhaps it was the cost of having used her so vigorously earlier. Since their return, she hadn't left his chest. Even when he bathed, they had shared a wooden tub filled with hot water prepared by a few workers.
Kia.
It seemed like she enjoyed it quite a bit, making a sound similar to a sigh instead of a sharp cry, pressing against Enkrid's chest here and there, and then purring as she dozed off. He had held her while bathing, worried she might drown if she fell asleep, though it wasn't likely that Esther would actually drown. Anyway, Enkrid finally recognized that the day had fully passed. He had overcome the wall and survived. Today, he learned something new based on his sense of evasion. Tomorrow awaited.
Is it already tomorrow?
He muttered, enchanted by the night, the moonlight, and the wind.
It's still midnight.
The voice belonged to Frog, who had returned covered in dirt with leaves stuck to her, to Luagarni, who returned with the moonlight behind her.
Did you just get back?
He had been wondering when they would return, apparently. It was after the day had fully passed. Whatever they had been doing, Luagarn didn't know about the attack by the monsters and beasts.
We ran quite far beyond the quarry. That guy, the one you mentioned, was indeed a cultist. He fled.
Enkrid and Luagarn discussed the postponed matters. Luagarn mentioned that she had lost track of the cultist.
Are you saying you lost him?
Frog? Lost a human? Just a human? Even if the guy was a priest of a cult? Frog, losing a mere human? Thoughts like these flashed continuously through Enkrid's mind. Luagern felt a strange discomfort rising. Based on this discomfort, she opened her mouth.
It was understandable to lose him.
Oh, I see. Yes, that makes sense.
Perhaps they were careless, or maybe it was just half-wit Frog. It might be, considering she's still here. If not, she would have returned to the capital long ago.
That's odd.
What? It seems your eyes are telling a different story.
You mean me?
Enkrid remained calm as always. It was just his eyes that seemed to tell another story. Even if Frog was a half-wit, she was quick-witted.
Hey,
Yes?
never mind.
The fact was they lost him. He didn't mean to call Frog a half-wit. Though his expression was quite insolent, it probably wasn't intentional. The fact remained that she lost him. But why did it feel so?
It must be someone associated with the monsters and beasts.
Enkrid spoke and Luagern nodded.
The ones who withdrew today might not scatter.
Luagern nodded at this too. If the cultist priest was involved, they could easily take over the leadership of the colony. The attacking monsters and beasts weren't some legendary creatures. Gnolls were only low-tier monsters. Low-tier monsters are usually dumb creatures. Among them were ghouls, who were said to have no brains, so gnolls weren't particularly smart. They just had a tendency to group together, fight and ambush. In fact, a single gnoll was easier to deal with than a ghoul. However, if they were armed and organized like this, it was a different story.
The Knowles' gear was surprisingly well prepared. It must have been the cultists. They might come again tomorrow.
Enkrid concluded. At that moment it seemed to Luagern that Enkrid's eyes were telling another story.
This happened because you lost him, didn't it?
Your eyes are.
Just as she was about to say something, Deutsche Pullman approached.
You're saying they didn't just retreat?
Deutsche, who had been lingering nearby, couldn't just listen in silence when such important words were being exchanged.
It seems that way.
At Deutsche's question, Enkrid's gaze briefly flickered toward Luagern. Then he spoke.
The mastermind behind the monster horde is still out there.
Yeah, something did seem off.
Deutsche nodded. It made sense. An armed monster horde, an unusually large number of monsters and beasts. There was also the matter of a spy among his own men, particularly one of his subordinates.
Ah, the missing adjutant was a cultist.
Enkrid added, which came as quite a shock.
That bastard.
Deutsche shook his head from side to side, trying to clear his thoughts.
But I will keep moving forward. I sent a pigeon. But it'll take at least a week for reinforcements to arrive. There's no backup nearby.
It's not something a small mercenary band should handle. Even if they could hire mercenaries for such a large-scale battle, it would cost an enormous amount of krona. Moreover, gathering that many mercenaries was a challenge in itself. Deutsche had only one option, to request support from the noble who sponsored the village. The pigeon had already been sent, but even in the best case, it would take a week for help to arrive.
It might take a week.
Enkrid muttered in response. It was unclear if he intended for anyone to hear it. He seemed lost in thought, as if speaking to himself. Deutsche didn't question the meaning of his words. He had too many other concerns. They had to prepare to defend the barricade. If the retreating monster horde was connected to the cultists, they had to be ready for magical attacks. If the enemy included cultists, they might use curses to drain their spirits. Cultists were unpredictable. Some acted like gods in mountain villages, ruling over the people. Moreover, if the cultist was still around, they had to be ready for any orders given to the gnolls.
I'll handle the cultist.
Luagern said to Deutsche, which was somewhat reassuring for him. Deutsche said sincerely. Luagern looked into Enkrid's eyes. The blue eyes amidst his black hair gleamed with a peculiar light.
Clean up the mess you made.
Luagern thought. She grimaced slightly but had nothing to say. She had, after all, lost track of the cultist. However, dealing with someone versed in summoning magic was difficult to handle alone. Summoning magic, those who haven't faced it wouldn't understand, but fighting against it with mere iron is nearly impossible. It's challenging to defend against or counter without the aid of spells.
What's the matter?
Enkrid's eyes were still bright blue and piercing. Luagern decided it was better not to engage in a conversation with those blue eyes. If the cultist returned the next day with monsters and beasts, she would prove herself then.
Aren't we having a sparring session today?
Luagern asked as she moved away.
I asked Esther to do something, and she's in this state, So today is not a good day.
Enkrid replied, stroking the head of the panther nestled against his chest. There wasn't much else to say.
I see.
Luagarn gracefully excused herself and went to wash up. She noticed a stream nearby and decided it would be a good spot. Frogs, being naturally inclined towards water, would appreciate it. She felt a strong desire to dive into the cool water.
Do you think we can hold out?
As Frog departed, Kreis asked, looking at Enkrid. Enkrid, who had been standing idly, tilted his head.
Hold out.
The Knoll Horde will be back tomorrow, right?
Oh, they will.
His indifferent attitude and calm tone suggested he was lost in thought. What's up with this platoon leader again? Kreis conveyed his thoughts through his eyes, and Enkrid didn't hold back. It's important to address such behavior early on. Enkrid kicked Kreis in the chest, causing him to roll to the side.
Ouch!
Kreis groaned as he fell.
Why did you do that? Didn't your eyes look a bit strange?
Enkrid said, and Kreis knew that once his platoon leader made up his mind, he followed through without hesitation. Moreover, Enkrid was perceptive, much like Kreis himself. He had noticed the look in Kreis's eyes. While Enkrid often tolerated jokes, when he decided something was wrong, he acted decisively, just like now.
My eyes!
Yes, keep them straight.
Enkrid was finally satisfied. It was time to sleep. Getting a good night's rest to be in top condition for tomorrow was crucial. He had applied ointment to a few scratches. His muscles were a bit strained, but he would be fine after a night's rest.
I wonder how well Frog will fight when provoked.
It was an intriguing thought as Enkrid prepared for sleep. While Enkrid rested deeply, Deutsche Pullman, his subordinates and other villagers oscillated between hope and despair.
Weren't they supposed to be gone? Are they coming back? A cultist is involved? Oh, Lord of the Sun, my lord, watch over us, Lord. Oh no, demons are coming. Demons.
Those gripped by fear wept and babbled nonsense. The faithful prayed. Those with a cool head considered the danger. The commanders focused on immediate tasks. It was a night filled with personal worries and duties for everyone. Most had no choice but to stay awake through the night, with guards keeping watch until dawn. It was a day endured thanks to Enkrid's efforts. To Deutsche, it seemed that without Enkrid, the battle would have been lost. He had observed how Enkrid fought. It was unlikely he could do it again. It was the result of a fortunate accident brought about by a twisted situation. Otherwise, what kind of person would charge alone into a horde of beasts? As the day passed and dawn broke, a vigilante standing guard in front of Enkrid's house saw the hero with dark blue hair emerge. Enkrid started his morning later than usual. As he came out, he began his exercises, sweating profusely as he trained intensely. The vigilante worried whether it was too much, wondering if it was okay to expend so much energy. Concerned, the vigilante spoke up.
Don't you ever take a break, even on a day like this?
After overexerting himself yesterday, they couldn't be sure if another day of crisis awaited them today. Enkrid nodded in response to the vigilante's words.
I had a good dream.
Huh? The question was about resting, but that was his answer. Enkrid seemed focused only on his own thoughts, continuing his training. Then Frog came out.
A good dream? You were tossing and turning a lot.
Seems I was sleep-talking.
This was the conversation between Frog and Enkrid. The vigilante had nothing more to say and stepped back. Soon the panther and the soldier with large eyes also came out. The soldier yawned and nodded slightly when their eyes met the vigilante's. The vigilante responded in kind. Finally, the female ranger came out. She exhaled deeply, and it was clear from her gait that she wasn't in good shape.
Why are you coming out?
Enkrid asked upon seeing her.
I should at least shoot my bow.
The female ranger replied.
It's fine.
But you said they might come again today.
Probably.
If they come, it's a good thing.
This was what Enkrid, Finn, and then again Frog said. The vigilante found it difficult to keep up with their conversation.
If they come, it's a good thing.
Frog repeated the words once more with a forceful tone. There was a sense of energy, menace, and resolve in her words. Just seeing Frog made the vigilante's knees tremble. Bang, bang, bang. While the vigilante's courage faltered momentarily, an emergency bell rang throughout the village, reaching everyone's ears. It's often said that the worst-case scenario always happens, or that the things you least want to face inevitably come to pass. Both sayings seemed to mean the same thing.
Knolls.
A messenger ran, shouting from the front. It was time for Deutsch's defensive strategy, prepared overnight to come into action. Enkrid also began to move. His body was ready, all he needed was his equipment. Kreis had cleaned his 2 swords before bed, polishing them with oil made from rendered fat to a shine. While some of the chainmail inside his leather armor was slightly damaged, it wasn't a significant issue. Though he might be short on throwing daggers, today might only require swordplay. He was prepared.
Well then, Luagarne.
Enkrid called out to Frog while putting on his armor, and Frog nodded. It was time to redeem herself and demonstrate her worth to the insolent-eyed Enkrid.
Let's go.
Luagarn replied, and soon the group moved out. Finn joined them, intending to observe if she couldn't help. Kreis sighed deeply, muttering about bad luck, but knowing that nothing would change by complaining, he quickly followed suit. Whatever happened next, it was clear they needed to face it together. Bang, 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 bang. The emergency bell continued to ring above their heads. The emergency alarm rang, but no one woke up from their sleep upon hearing it. After all, it's impossible to wake up again if you're already awake. Everyone stayed up all night with open eyes. The news that the gnolls were coming again kept them on edge. The beasts and monsters returned once more. This time, it was different from before. The creatures filled one side of the wilderness, and among them were objects they hadn't seen before. 2 or 3 of them were approaching, carrying long objects under their arms. These were long tools with holes in the middle. Unlike before, they weren't charging recklessly. They had some semblance of order. There were dozens of such organized groups. Deutsche, recalling what he learned from a military veteran mercenary when he first joined, tried to estimate their numbers. He bent his fingers to form a circle and used it to count the gnolls, estimating how many such circles would cover the entire area.
20.
Roughly 20 per circle and about 50 circles in total. It seemed to be around that number. Mixed among the gnolls and hyena beasts were ghoul hordes creeping around. It was a horrifying number, even more than yesterday. Yesterday was already a nightmare. Everything was dreadful, but the most terrifying part was what they were holding. Those long, hole-riddled tools.
Ladders.
The word slipped out involuntarily. Deutsche Pullman felt a sense of dread. The gnolls had brought ladders. Monstrous gnolls used weapons. Therefore, if taught, they could use tools. What was more astonishing was that it was evident these were hastily made objects.
They made ladders.
No way. Why the hell did the gnolls make ladders? There must be a sinister mastermind behind this, someone pulling the strings.
The cultists.
The thought made him even more anxious. Of course, the immediate problem was the ladders. Whether hastily made or carefully constructed, if those ladders started piling up against the walls, the quality of the ladders wouldn't matter.
No.
Deutsch shouted instinctively.
Do you think we have that?
Came the village chief's retort. There were some stones left to throw, but not many. They had quite a few arrows. But could they fend off the roughly 1,000 monsters with those? When they were all bunched up under the walls, shooting would hit them. But there were only 20 archers. They couldn't pour boiling oil like in a siege. Should they collect and pour filth? Would hitting them with excrement drive away the gnolls or hyena beasts? Not a chance. They had to hold out for 7 more days for reinforcements. But could they make it?
If only we had enough stones.
With only 20 archers and the entire village pitching in, what would happen? Once the stone throwing was over, they couldn't really use the villagers as any sort of fighting force. Sending these villagers into melee combat would be like throwing rare steaks to the gnolls. They couldn't haul enough throwable stones from the quarry in just 1 day. They lacked the means and manpower. Even if they carried whatever they could, it wouldn't be enough. They couldn't stop them that way.
No chance.
If the ladders went up, it would be over. The difference in numbers was clear, even if they tried to stop them with arrows and rolling stones. Even if the cultists pulled some tricks, if they cast a curse, how could they resist? They'd be lucky if everyone didn't collapse on the spot. Deutsche himself had no real means to resist such curses. This was just a small pioneer village. It wasn't something a former mercenary leader could handle alone. To be honest, Deutsche wanted to run away. Yesterday's victory was already a distant memory. The craftsman they brought in to build the wall had joked about naming it the Mad Enkrid Wall, hadn't he? What a joke. They couldn't even lay the foundation stones properly. At this rate, this place would become a colony nest for the gnolls. It would become their village. A village for gnolls? The thought was maddening. Eventually, a large-scale hunting party would be organized, and they'd easily burn such a village to the ground. But what about those who would die and lose their homes in the meantime? Deutsche had invested everything he had in this pioneer village. If it was taken, he'd be left with nothing. He'd have to start from scratch, swinging his sword for a living again. So, should he run away? Is that really what he should do?
If I run, where would I go?
There was nowhere to go. Even if he took the mercenaries and escaped through the quarry, where would they head next? Should they cross the border? Yeah, right. An unplanned journey would be akin to suicide. Yet his long experience as a mercenary told him that running away offered the better chance of survival.
Damn it.
The curse slipped out instinctively. Just then a voice spoke up nearby.
What was that guy's name again, Deutsche?
The voice belonged to the hero of the previous night, the crazy platoon leader with black hair and blue eyes, the madman who had single-handedly charged into the gnoll horde and sliced through their leader.
Deutsche, open the gate a bit.
Enkrid spoke. Deutsche's brow furrowed, mirroring the turmoil inside him. Beside him, Kreis spoke in a clear, prepared voice.
Remember, the command authority lies with my platoon leader. Follow the orders immediately, Chief of Security.
He was merely stating what needed to be done and what needed to be protected, but the effect was clear. Kreis didn't use an arrogant or forceful tone. The timing was perfect. Is there any other option? Look at the ladders. Isn't this the worst moment compared to when they first arrived? And what about the cultists? You don't have a choice. In summary, it was an escape route. By relinquishing command, Deutsche could avoid responsibility. From Kreis's perspective, Deutsche Pullman was a stubborn but decent man.
It would have been easier if he had given up earlier.
Security of the Pioneer Village. What's the point of that title? Future planning? This is a gamble. How many pioneer villages have fallen like this? Especially in such a tangled situation. If it were Kreis, he would have already looted the village with his mercenaries and fled. Seriously. Of course Kreis couldn't do that. If he did, Enkrid's hand or foot might become a blade against him. After all, the platoon leader was genuinely committed to saving people. Thinking about it made Kreis a bit uneasy. The guy had a knack for doing strange things. Just look at this situation. He was still up to something odd. It was right after the emergency alarm had rung.
Only Lua, Esther, and I will go out.
Where to?
Outside the walls.
This was what Enkrid had said amidst the ringing alarm. Kreis had seriously wondered if Enkrid had hit his head during the fight yesterday.
You know you almost died yesterday?
Enkrid nodded.
It was a close call.
Does this guy not care about his own life?
Eyes on me.
Just as Kreis thought that, Enkrid opened his mouth. Not wanting to get hit, Kreis averted his gaze.
What if we're unlucky today? We have Lua, don't we?
No matter how impressive the frog is Lua some kind of knight? No, she's not, right? No, she's not, so it's dangerous.
Find something to do yourself.
This was as far as Enkrid went. That was the end of the conversation. After that, Kreis had to think for himself.
The frontline combat will be done by just one human, one frog, and one panther.
What could the remaining people do? They could cheer.
They could also shoot arrows appropriately.
Kreis dismissed the fleeting thoughts. It was time to think of immediate tasks.
Then, as I assume command, I order you to open the gate.
Kreis spoke. Enkrid was already at the gate, chatting with Lua and Esther hurrying along beside them.
Don't die!
Kreis muttered to himself. If the platoon leader died, it would be difficult for Kreis to survive as well. Kreis didn't think Enkrid was a foolish person.
He must have a plan.
As absurd as it seemed, Kreis trusted him. He remembered Enkrid's back blocking his path in the middle of a battlefield. They barely survived that time. The platoon leader, then and now, were incomparable. It wasn't just about the promotion from squad leader to platoon leader. His skills had improved. His ambition to become a knight seemed more achievable with how rapidly he was improving.
I said to open it! Disobedience will be punished by beheading, Deutsche Pullman.
Kreis's voice was now forceful, a tone he hadn't used earlier. He wasn't a mercenary leader nor Enkrid. He was just a weak human, so he needed to rely on authority. Deutsche responded, relinquishing his duties and responsibilities as the former chief of security.
Cut off the heads of those who don't obey.
He directed this to Deutsche, though he didn't actually expect anyone to be beheaded. Of course, that didn't happen. Soon the pulley creaked, and the log gate began to open. Enkrid, Lua, and Esther stepped outside. It wasn't a reckless charge like yesterday. The gnolls and hyena beasts, though awkwardly formed, maintained some order, while a mass of ghouls approached from one side. Somewhere among them, the cultist was hiding. Before a force that could be called an army, only 3 stood. Seeing this, Kreis felt a dry mouth. He swallowed hard, avoiding the gaze of others. Whatever they did, he had to support them from behind.
Bring all soldiers skilled in archery.
The archers.
Place stones around so they can be thrown easily.
The villagers and everyone else began to move according to Kreis's orders. Using the log barricade as a makeshift wall, they prepared to face the approaching enemy force. Enkrid was relieved that Kreis was managing things, freeing him from worrying about it.
If it weren't for the treasure, this would have been a lot of trouble.
Had it not been for some map-related task, Kreis wouldn't have been involved in this mission. In that case, Enkrid wouldn't have brought him along. Handling miscellaneous commands and other minor tasks would have fallen on him if not for Kreis. Deutsche Pullman, whether a glaive or one-eyed, looked like someone who had lost his courage.
He looks like someone just waiting to die.
It was a look he had seen often, one of a broken spirit. After observing this, Enkrid stopped paying attention. He focused on his sword, himself, and the new insights he had gained. It was time for that. As his dream from last night came to mind, the conversation with the ferryman, as vivid as a brand in his mind, his reaction, and the events that followed.
You used a trick.
The ferryman showed no emotion when saying that.
It just happened that way.
These words were spoken in his mind. The ferryman seemed to understand. The ferry bobbed up and down even though there were no waves. It seemed to reflect the ferryman's current mood. How dare you? A trick. Such deceit, yet Enkrid felt at peace.
Bound by laws, wandering through time, you will regret this. This is not the end.
The ferryman recited some verse as a warning, but Enkrid merely acknowledged it. What use was there in pondering words he couldn't understand? Even now, and in the dream he only dreamt of tomorrow. That was the end of it. The ferryman vanished, and then the nightmare began. He dreamt of being trapped in a well, seeing the moon shining above but unable to climb out day after day. In the dream, Enkrid clawed at the walls until his nails cracked, peeled, and broke, but he couldn't reach the top. That's why he had thrashed about in his sleep.
What kind of dream was it?
Lua asked as the log gate opened.
It was a dream where the moonlight was beautiful.
It wasn't untrue. The moonlight shining above the well was beautiful, intoxicating even in the dream. It was moonlight that required no drop of alcohol.
It doesn't sound like a nightmare.
Does it?
They exchanged a few nonchalant words.
Caw.
Esther made a sound as she looked at the open gate. Glancing down, Enkrid felt Esther staring up at him.
I'll need your help again today.
Esther was no ordinary panther. That much was already clear. Then what about himself?
Who?
He took a deep breath and recalled what he had learned. Oh, there was something he needed to check first. He almost forgot.
Lua.
Speak.
Show us what you can do.
How well would a provoked frog fight? Remembering this fact, he spoke. Lua's cheeks puffed up.
All right, I'll show you.
The frog spoke first, then dashed forward, kicking off the ground and sending dirt flying like a fountain. How reassuring it was to see. He was curious. How well would a provoked frog fight? Enkrid could sum up Luagarna's fight with just 2 words. Boom and bang. Charging straight towards the gnoll horde, it was an unstoppable charge without a thought, as reckless as a ghoul's brain. When a knight rides a proper warhorse and slashes down, that's called a charge. Couldn't we call Luagarna's assault the same thing right now?
It seems like it.
The effect was sufficient. Ignoring the scratches incurred while rushing, she swung her whip with her right hand and her sword with her left. Each time the whip cut through the air, it struck the gnolls' heads, shoulders, and bellies. Boom, bang, crack! The loud noises echoed as heads burst, spraying black blood and brains everywhere. Then, with the sword in her left hand, she stabbed the heads of the approaching hyena beasts. Swish, 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 thud, crack! The sounds repeated as she stabbed and withdrew her sword, causing 3 or 4 hyena beasts with short snouts to collapse to the ground, bleeding black blood. Growl, croak. Beyond the hyena beasts dying with black foam in their mouths, Luagarne charged on, killing 9 gnolls and 15 hyenasin beasts in her assault. Afterwards, the gnolls began grouping in 5s or 6s to face Luagarne. Luagarne puffed out her cheeks once and swung her whip fiercely. The whip flew through the air, wrapped around an enemy's neck instead of striking them, and yanked them forward. Have you ever seen a flying gnoll? You just did. The gnoll flew through the air, landed headfirst on the ground with a thud, and in the meantime, Frog's whip and sword acted like a continuous guillotine, killing and killing again. Frog's furious strength was truly astonishing. She was showcasing great strength and innate combat sense. A loud cry from a gnoll, akin to a scream, echoed. In the meantime, Enkrid also trudged forward step by step. Luagarne, the frog, displayed her anger appropriately through provocation. It was an astonishing power. However, now that something has started to become visible or graspable through today's repetition.
Can I not match her?
Though Frog belonged to a combat race, not all were the same. Luagarne had repeatedly said she was a scholar, not someone immersed in combat, if it's now.
I don't think I'll lose.
Such a thought suddenly occurred. Was it arrogance or confidence from accumulated experience? Of course, all battles are unpredictable until fought, but if the intention is to kill,
I think it's possible.
that thought crossed her mind.
I can teach swordsmanship, but dealing with knights or your mad group, well, they're quite formidable opponents.
Luagarne, the talent assessor, was candid. She clearly knew her skills and where she stood.
I'm more inclined towards curiosity than competitive spirit.
Which frog wouldn't be curious? As she spoke, Luagarne's eyes sparkled. Her large, round, bulging eyes seemed to glimmer with light. Afterwards, when Enkrid spoke about a strategy to deal with the horde of monsters, Frog puffed out her cheeks and tilted her head in curiosity. Accustomed to human life, Luagarne often expressed her thoughts with gestures similar to those of humans. Upon hearing the strategy, it was as if she was questioning what kind of madness this was.
We did it yesterday too.
Responding to that statement, Enkrid felt his heart, body, hands, feet, and entire being heat up a feeling of wanting to go wild. It felt like wanting to run in a sudden downpour of rain, or perhaps the urge to roll around in a snowy field covered in white. Whatever it was, he wanted to do something. Specifically, he wanted to swing his sword.
So just cover my back.
This was a request to both Luagarne and Esther. The village was on the verge of falling anyway. If they had even brought ladders, well, that was the end of it. So what should be done?
Destroy what they believe in.
What do the gnolls and cultists believe in? Numbers, tools, ladders, and their manpower. In the process, he wanted to release something boiling inside him. Something burning, something rising up.
It seems we'll need a short but intense fight.
Enkrid murmured as he stepped forward. He muttered as if reciting a verse, thinking of the ferryman, and then stepped forward. While Luagarne drew all attention with her strength, Enkrid approached the horde of monsters and beasts. Luagarne, having taken a breath, stepped back. By then, she had slaughtered nearly 30 gnolls and hyena beasts combined. Frog returned with small wounds on her arms, legs, thighs, and abdomen. She was strong, but if asked if she was so strong as to be untouchable, well, it seemed not. She seemed reachable. Enkrid stopped among the gnolls, hyena beasts, and ghouls. Goo! Gnolls and hyena beasts. Kayak! The ghouls were the first to greet him. They welcomed him indeed. As he looked at them, Enkrid thought, is the power of a knight something unreachable? Does that mean it can't be reached? No one knows the future, but short but intense. It seemed like he could show something. The enemy was numerous, a mass of countless monsters and beasts. Among them, those with ladders could be seen. There were roughly over 30 of them. Good, 30. Acknowledging this, he drew his swords. One in his right hand, one in his left. Although he was much more accustomed to handling a single sword, this seemed better for now. Facing a multitude of enemies, Enkrid swung his swords.
What is he trying to do?
Luagarne did not ask Enkrid. There were several reasons for not asking. First of all, she was confident she could escape even if she were amidst the gnolls and monster hordes. If things went wrong, she could lose an arm and get away. The arm would regenerate, so there was no problem. Therefore, she didn't ask when he decided to go into the midst of the monsters. Another reason was Enkrid's change.
Why has he changed?
She had been away for only half a day, but Enkrid's posture and aura had changed.
How?
Luagarn, as a talent assessor, naturally gauged Enkrid's skills by observing his movements, gestures, and stance.
How?
The question repeated itself in her mind as this man had changed significantly. While skills could suddenly improve, this felt different. It was distinctly different from what she had seen in others before.
I have an appointment at the salon.
That's how geniuses were. Luagarne had been astounded when a seemingly lazy person suddenly showed remarkable improvement. That's what geniuses were like. But didn't they usually show signs or indications? Yes, they did. Luagarne could see that. The signs or omens that appeared just before someone improved. It was only natural to grow after seeing such signs.
Nothing.
She saw no such signs, no omens, nothing. Absolutely nothing, and yet he had changed suddenly. Is this possible? Moreover, in Luagarne's view, Enkrid didn't even fall into the genius category, so how? Again, the same question. Now she stood here to confirm if Enkrid had indeed changed, or if her own senses were failing.
If things go south.
She could just take him and run. Beside her, Esther extended her claws and tapped the ground. Seeing that, it seemed this bold panther had similar thoughts. Concerns, expectations, curiosity, and a desire for the unknown combined, directing their gaze forward. Then their worries dissipated. Ching-ting, Enkrid with 2 swords drawn moved, into the midst of the gnolls, beasts, and ghouls. His purpose was clear.
Ladders.
He charged straight towards the ones carrying the ladders. Luagarn had targeted that as well, however, unless one was a monstrous knight or a warrior whose primary occupation was combat, it was difficult to face them head-on. A horde is still a horde. Those who had retreated were hidden. While it might be possible to catch and kill those rushing forward, chasing down those retreating, that required a different approach. The problem was there were simply too many of them. The gnolls were easy prey. For Frog, they were enemies she could kill, even while half asleep, but there were just too many of them. Luagarn wasn't a knight. She was a frog, but even frogs have their limits. She could take down one cultist, but couldn't handle the entire horde. That was common sense. Breaking common sense is what the continent called knights or knight-level warriors. And now, whoosh, swoosh, thud, slice, chop, bang, slash, thud. Enkrid's swords cut through the path. He broke the path laid down by common sense. It was impossible to increase one's skills without any signs or omens. Even for a genius, that was impossible. How? Enkrid's swords moved exactly as needed, at the right moments. He stabbed and slashed, cut and thrust. He lightly split the skulls of approaching gnolls, and a sideways swing severed the pole of a spear held by a gnoll. As the gnoll with the severed spear pole opened its mouth and tried to bite Enkrid's shoulder with sharp fangs, a flash of light sliced upward. The flash split the gnoll's head in half. A split head couldn't bite anything. The gnoll with the split head collapsed as its head became 2. The force behind the blade. Luagarn realized that this force was no less than her own. It was the same strength he had occasionally displayed during sparring. However, during sparring he had only known how to unleash it without control. Now he used it with perfect balance, only as much as needed, and then retracted it. He slashed vertically, stabbed forward, and his feet kept moving to maintain his position. When a ladder came within reach, he swung his sword to break it. Then, 5 or 6 ghouls charged at him in unison. Their stance indicated they would cling to him even if it meant their death. This was the result of the cultists' brainwashing spells, but it was futile. Before the mass of ghouls could reach him, Enkrid stepped forward with his left foot, pulled his right foot back, and then swung his sword as if he had been waiting for this moment. Whoosh, swoosh, crack, bones, muscles, tendons. None of it mattered. A spinning slash in the Tangum style cut through the mass of ghouls. Arms, legs, heads, chests, and abdomens of the ghouls lay scattered on the ground, among them. With a thud, Enkrid drove one of his swords into the ground. With a peculiar sound, Enkrid released the sword, and a throwing knife flew from his hand. It was a whistling knife. 10 throwing knives scattered like the wind, striking all around. The whistling knives embedded themselves in the heads of those carrying the ladders. Knowing how to use tools didn't necessarily mean knowing how to cherish them. As the ladders fell to the ground, the creatures stumbled over them. The hastily made tools were destroyed. Mutant gnolls charged. These creatures had larger heads, and 3 or 4 of them surrounded Enkrid while a hyena beast tried to bite him. Enkrid, who had previously grabbed the sword he had planted in the ground, suddenly vanished. Luagarni's eyes didn't miss this, though even her keen vision could only catch a lingering afterimage.
A charge move.
It was similar to the charging techniques often seen in junior knights. The speed was comparable. Disappearing just before being surrounded, Enkrid reappeared behind a mutant knoll on the right, crossing his swords in a stabbing motion. The 2 swords pierced the mutant's heart in a cross, then withdrew. Piercing the heart caused the creature to swell, but it could be ignored. She was an experienced frog, however. Even with her experience, this was the first time she'd seen a human like this in action. The unknown stirred something in her. Enkrid pulled his swords back. As the blades were withdrawn, black blood flowed out. The mutant knoll died. A hyena beast lunged at him. It was kicked aside with a thud, its head smashed by the pommel of a sword. A ghoul attacked without hesitation, claws bared. Its poisoned claws were deadly weapons. With a casual swing of his sword, Enkrid decapitated the ghoul. There's a saying that ghouls have no brains, but now it seemed that wasn't true. They had small brains, barely the size of a finger. Enkrid's actions with his swords hadn't taken long, not half a day, not even hours. Perhaps only the time it takes to drink a cup of tea, a fleeting moment even to the long-lived dragons and fairies. In that brief time, Enkrid had destroyed most of the ladders. He turned nearly 100 monsters and beasts into rotting piles of flesh. The ghouls were almost entirely wiped out. Luagarn, the frog, felt her heart ache instead of feeling goosebumps. A mix of admiration and joy, the thrill of discovering something inexplicable, the happiness of encountering that unknown something before her. All these emotions combined, bringing tears to her eyes. It was a harsh happiness.
Ah.
She uttered in awe, singing the frog's battle song. Before she could even start the song, Enkrid suddenly stumbled back and collapsed, planting his sword in the ground as he fell to his knees. Even as he did this, his body wobbled. Then he spoke.
Help me.
What? What? She had just begun to feel moved, ready to sing more and shed more tears. Why had the man who fought like a knight suddenly collapsed?
Hurry.
Enkrid spoke with pale lips. Luagarn instinctively reached out with her whip. With a swift flick, the whip wrapped around Enkrid's wrist. As she pulled him, Enkrid dragged across the ground, scraping over the cluttered remains. With a flick of her wrist, she lifted him into the air. Catching the airborne Enkrid with a thud, she cushioned the impact by bending her knees.
Let's go.
The man with black hair and blue eyes spoke from her arms. Luagarn's sense of awe was interrupted, but the initial something she felt hadn't disappeared. She nodded. The remaining gnolls and beasts charged at them, but they had decided to retreat, and then—
Shoot! Shoot!
As they retreated, arrows rained down from above in support. The monsters and beasts charged again, even as arrows pierced their heads. They swung their claws and axes at the wooden barriers. Arrows and rocks fell on them. A few of them had set up ladders.
Is this the time to watch?
At Kreis's shout, former mercenaries and vigilantes under Deutsch's command sprang into action. They pushed away the ladders and fought. With the return of Luagarn and Esther, the few ladders proved useless. Deutsche Pullman muttered, watching the retreating monsters from the wall. Luagarn agreed with that sentiment.
It is madness.
Enkrid had fought briefly but effectively, almost like a knight. Without any signs or indications, in just half a day, a man previously thought to have no talent had changed. Luagarn's heart felt young again. For a moment she felt like a girl.